Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is David Godin, a filmmaker and a father whose son may be joining us at various moments during our conversation, which would be spectacular as far as I'm concerned. So welcome, David. Glad you're here. I'm looking forward to our conversation. So tell us a little bit about what you do and the kind of film work you do, and how did you come to be a filmmaker?
So, first of all, thank you, Ed, for having me on the show. I'm very excited to be here. Gosh, how did I get into film? It's always hard when I'm asked that. The first thing that comes to mind is my dad always wanted to be a filmmaker. When I was 12 years old, he's a big Mac Apple product geek guy, and he brought home the first Apple iBook laptop, and it had iMovie on it, first version of iMovie.
Cool.
And we had already played on our home video camera, plugged it in, and he just kind of walked away. He's like, you mess around with this. And I just remember the fact that I could put these images that I filmed on our home camera into this software and put music to it. It was like the heavens opened. And that was the beginning of kind of knowing there was some calling there in that. And so then, I remember then writing to myself in middle school a letter that I would have to open the day I graduated high school. And part of the big question was, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it said film director. And so I studied it in college a little bit. And when I graduated, I started working as a production assistant on TV commercials in New York City. And after about 5 or 6 shoots, a producer at the production company that I was working with, who I hadn't met, pulled me aside in the office. I was returning some stuff from the shoot. And she said, "David, what do you really want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to direct. And I know that I can based on, what I'm seeing and all that I've studied." And she says, "I want you to take this the right way, but we're never going to hire you again. Go start shooting fake commercials, call yourself a director, basically get out of our office." And it was this real kind of like initiatory type of moment where I didn't know how I felt about it. I was like, "But I like working with you guys." And she was just kind of like, "Nope, you're going to get pigeonholed here. Go start just doing it." And that was the moment where I think, saw there's no real systematic way to become a filmmaker. Yes, you can go to a certain school. Yes, you can, watch Martin Scorsese's masterclass and study films, and that's all really important too. But part of it is just, you kind of got to throw yourself into the wind and into the darkness of this huge world and say, I have to start.
Hold on one second. Okay, Doc, I can talk. Thank you. It's all clear, babe. I'm good.
So that's really,
that would be an outstanding premise for a film.
I never thought of that.
Being kicked out of your job because they see something in you, they believe something, that you have something in that staying there will not be a good thing, and you get kicked out and you have to go fend for yourself. It'd be a great story. It'd be a great film. I mean,
I never thought of that. That's kind of, I like that. I appreciate that you said that.
yeah, because I see that sort of thing in a lot of people who they they have this desire and they go to work, but they're not being kicked out of work to go actually pursue that. And so that thing is just such a cool thing that they should you should be very grateful that they did that to you.
And you know what's so crazy is that I can't, because it was my only interaction ever with this woman, that I can't remember her. And, part of me almost feels like, was she a ghost? Like, because I went back actually looking for her to thank her, a couple years later, and nobody, not a real ghost, buddy, no. And nobody remembered who I was talking about. And so it became this kind of thing that I always thought about.
That's very cool. So what was the first film you did?
Oh, geez. Well, so this is also always a really tough question because I'm still at the cusp of about to go into making my first feature film. So other filmmaker friends and we always talk about, well, are you really a filmmaker if you've never made a feature film? And it's like, well, of course, there's other types of films.
Yeah.
But that's also a really tough question because where I go to is how far back do you want me to go? You know?
Well, yeah, at the beginning. I mean, at some point there was the first, um, the first time the camera rolled, the first time you took stuff that you had filmed, and then you edited it, and you did something that was complete, maybe even 30 seconds long, but something. It's like the first time a writer writes something like a blog post, the first blog post, or the first ad copy, or the first time that you know I mean, I look back at the first time I published something publicly, which was in
Mhm.
1999. It was a community column for the local newspaper, and I know that was cool. So that's what that's kind of what I'm driving at.
So I usually go with my gut. The first the first one that I really remember was I was also pretty young. I was probably 13 or 14, and it was my sister, my two younger cousins, and we made this little short called Mission Possible.
Mhm.
Um, and James Bond was kind of my favorite quote unquote superhero growing up. I kind of liked him more, and it was all about stealing this chip in a basement. And and I just remember putting that together, and when we all sat together and watched it, it was just again this feeling of um we did this together. And what that makes me think of when I say that, and it's probably the thing I love most about filmmaking, is I can think of no other artistic medium, perhaps outside of a symphony orchestra, that is so ultimately collaborative.
Mhm.
If you're a writer, you can be anywhere in the world with a pen and a paper or a laptop and write. Um, Singer songwriter, probably same thing. Have your guitar and your voice and your ability to write. But in order to make a film, again, you could make a film by yourself, but I don't know how interesting it would be. If depending on who the subject is. But it's such a collaborative art form, and the feeling you get of spending time with this group of people with this singular goal, and you're all putting in these little tiny pieces of effort and talent and skill into this one, what could be a 30-second commercial or a 2-hour film. When you're done with that, you feel like you've gone to battle in a way with these people. They become your family.
Sure.
And I cherish that almost more than anything.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. I see that. And yeah, because I've known some other guys that do filmmaking. It's it's that is that okay, how do I bring all the people together who do things well that I don't do well? And
Yeah, exactly. And everyone has such a unique way of seeing one particular moment, and where I'm perhaps maybe focused on working with an actor and capturing the subtlety of this performance. There's an art director and production designer next to me that's like, if we just move those books on the back wall a little bit to the left, it'll fall into the way the light's coming through the window, and it'll just add this little richness of texture.
Mhm.
And so everyone's looking at different things, and then you see the final product and you don't realize that there could have been 1,000 little decisions that went into that one single image. um so it's just so cool. I mean, I never lose my excitement about that.
So do you have particular filmmakers that you feel like have been, I don't want to say inspirational because that's kind of a hackneyed term, but who have kind of said to you, this is kind of film that I would like, this is the storytelling I'd like to do, and the way it looks and the way it moves from scene to scene. Is there, or who are the filmmakers that really appeal to you that way?
Oh geez, you're asking some great questions.
Well, let me
uh
ask you this: What's your favorite?
yeah.
What's your favorite movie? You have one?
Oh man, that's even harder. uh
Good.
I mean, the first one that really comes to mind that just still like gets me every time is Taxi Driver. I
Yeah.
mean, that it just has a particular um slow psychological burn of someone losing themselves or maybe finding themselves. And uh there's so much about that film that sometimes when I watch it I think, how did Scorsese do this? Like, how did he pull it off? Or when I watch Apocalypse Now, I think, okay, I know what it's like to go, make a commercial or a piece of longer form content for a couple of days. These people spent years going. Coppola invested his own money to go into the Philippines and build these massive sets,
Right.
and he almost went psychotic
Yeah.
in the process. And yet you watch that film and you're just, how did they actually do it? It's so those two films. But um I also really love, and this might sound like a strange segue from the two films that I just mentioned, but there was it was called the Taiwanese New Wave.
I will.
So there was this really interesting movement in the early 1980s in Taiwan. They labeled it the Taiwanese New Wave, but essentially it was these younger filmmakers uh, making films that were really about the people of Taiwan, kind of like everyday people.
Mhm.
Um, yes, sometimes in Taipei in the bigger cities, but it was also a little bit more, in the mountains, in the north. And I've always just been really drawn to, um, the films about everyday people, kind of witnessing their actions and their rhythms and their routines, and just because then I feel like I'm really experiencing this other part of the world. I'm getting caught in their way of life. And I just, probably in my early 20s I really fell in love with that era. And there's been many iterations of that around the world, kind of a post, let's say Hollywood or more commercialized uh, uh, generation of films where the studios were producing. And then these younger filmmakers come in and they're like, I don't want to shoot this in a studio. I want to shoot this in my my aunt's house that's up in the mountains because I find that more interesting. And so for me personally, I'm much more drawn to that
Is-
side of things.
Should that be considered realism? Neorealism?
I think that's definitely a big part of it. So I would say neorealism, I think that's a good general term to describe this type
There's a
of
bunch of
work.
Japanese and Korean filmmakers. I'm a film buff, so
Okay.
also
Oh,
did
absolutely.
and
Like,
and the difference is the Japanese are very family oriented, and the Koreans are very have this hard edge of um, horrifying characters. You know,
yes, no, that's very true. I mean, I think, well, for example, a lot of these the Taiwanese new wave directors like Ho Shin and Edward Yang, they were very influenced by Yasuhiro Ozu
oh yeah,
in Japan, and
yeah.
he was a huge influence on them. Um, and then there's a contemporary Japanese director, Koreeda Hirokazu, uh, and his films are very much. Um, he doesn't like to be compared to Ozu because I think he's like, well, you're comparing me to him because I'm Japanese, but he compares himself to the films of Ken Loach,
Oh,
um, in the UK, and he said, I feel like I'm much more uh, of Ken Loach type of filmmaker than I am an Ozu filmmaker. But I think all of these people, even Ozu, even in his kind of very formalistic rigor of how he made his films, like you said, they were very family oriented. You know, it was about the generations of Japanese trying to find ways to get along, um and through the industrialization of Japan, and that battle of industrialization and the younger generation and the nature, and the agricultural side of the older generations of the Japanese. And I mean, all of that's just so fascinating. You just learn so much about the world through these really great filmmakers. I think in a way that it's like, well, they're essentially poets. They're poets of their time and of their place, and their medium just so happened to be visual as opposed to, you know.
are there American filmmakers that have a similar style?
So
Or
I would say one that comes to mind would be someone like John Cassavetes.
mhm.
Um, in that era of filmmaking, the American New Wave, in the late '60s and '70s, and I think, I can't think of anyone now per se that's still making films continuously in that genre, except that's not true. One filmmaker I love that's contemporary, her name's Kelly Reichardt.
Mhm.
I For me, she's at the very top of American filmmakers who are really making interesting character films about, I'll say, real Americans, kind of your everyday people. And then there's also Deborah Granick. Um, she's made some excellent films, documentary and narrative, in the similar vein. But there's also just so much good stuff out there that you can't even find, and that's there's some great festival films that never get distribution, and then it's hard to find them. But there are some people doing some really good stuff here in the States.
Yeah, I I like those kind of films. I also like the kind of the popcorn and Coke kind of films too. You know, it's but
Oh yeah, definitely.
I like um I like films that are built around an idea, you know, and
Hmm.
the idea drives the narrative. My favorite film is The Leopard. You
The
know
Leopard. I'm familiar. I actually haven't seen that film.
Yeah, Visconti did a great job with The Leopard, and it's it's about the transition taking place in Italy during
Hmm.
the shifting from the aristocracy to democracy, and
Hmm.
um, but it's also about this wealthy count who's realizing that he's no longer the young man, the vital man that he once was, and
Right.
he's sad about that, and he sees that his life is kind of passing him by. So
Right.
it's such a
He's
powerful.
he's a really, I mean, excellent filmmaker. Um, and of course, I'm not gonna be able to remember the one of his that I like that I really saw. That the one you're speaking of is on my much too long list that I don't know if I'll
You're thinking of
ever get
Senso?
through. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great one too. Yeah, I like. Yeah, I've been watching films for a long time, and and I buy them. I don't because I figured they're not going to be online it forever, so I buy them. So I'll get quite a collection. And
That's
I
awesome.
like to watch the development of these, like um, like uh, like all the Godzilla films.
Hmm.
I love the very first one. The first one is just so very powerful, and it's a powerful statement about Japan in the 50s.
Hmm.
And it's a statement about the government of Japan in not just the post-World War, but the war
Hmm.
years, and how it has come to haunt them in many ways. Such a great film. So
Yeah.
we're getting off topic, which is really to talk
No,
about
it's okay.
and your filmmaking. So the kinds of films you've been making have been more commercial. Is that what I understand?
Yeah. So, you know, yeah, keep going, buddy. Keep setting up your fort. Um, my day job is I'm a freelance commercial director, so meaning that I direct TV commercials. Um, and uh, in the last 6 or 7 years, my wife and I have also been writing our first feature film script in between like moving states and having two kids and buying a house. So we call it our third child. Um, and it's finally actually just 2 days ago, I sent out draft 13 of the screenplay um, to a couple of really good, trusted, friends, filmmaker advisors who, you know, what they say, we trust that it's very objective and um, good criticism. And I'm a sucker. I love harsh criticism. I want them to come back with comments everywhere because it's for the integrity of the project. I can separate myself from you know the actual words on the page.
So what is it? I mean, once you have a script, what are the steps that you have to take to turn this into a film? What kind of give us an idea of what a filmmaker has to go through to do that?
Oh geez. Well, I'm sure, as you know, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning something of the script part because that seems to be um one of the hardest parts is getting a script to a certain level of polish that you could send it off to, let's say, an actor's agent, and the agent or the agent's assistant might honestly read the first 10 pages. If they don't like the first 10 pages, they throw it away. um so so that's a challenge. Yeah, how do you get people interested? But then, of course, let's say hypothetically, now I have this great script, people are reading it. If and when you're lucky enough, and I think this is hard you know, and we're learning this a little bit the hard way, is when it's your first feature film, um, it's not impossible to get a really good, you know, name actor or actress to play the lead roles. It just takes a bit longer because you don't have another feature film to kind of give you the credibility. You have other types of work. Um, but I'll say, if you can get, and when you get a really good actor or actress attached, um, you'd be fascinated about how quickly that film can get funded. I
I want
mean, in sometimes in a matter of hours. If a reputable actor or actress says to their agent, "I'm in, sign me up for this. I'm fully bought in." We can turn around and go to this person or this, you know, wealthy individual and say, "Hey, so and so is now attached to the film." They say, "Great, how much do you want?" Because typically these actors or actresses have a certain amount of money that they're most likely going to bring in. Now, it's not always the case, but it's a pretty safe bet, and that's why a lot of things do get funded with these reputable names.
Do they bring in enough to pay for them?
Yes and no. I mean, um, there are plenty of examples I think of, you know, really big actors or actresses, you know, wanting $15 million just to do the movie, and the film's entire budget is 30 million, and you know, then at the box office it makes 3, you know. And so I um but I can't also say that I'm a huge expert on the box office. I try to stay, I feel like in order for me to function as a director and a writer, I have to stay in my lane in the creative process, and
Mhm.
then try to surround myself with the right people who are going to help, um, you know, basically get a meeting. And that's where I feel like the way you and I are speaking right now, if I have the chance to sit down with X actor or Y actress and sit in a coffee shop and just get to know each other, that's where I feel most confident that I could get them on board. Um, but in order to get that, of course, you have to go through all the gatekeepers, in order to get there. So it's a challenge, and I think most people aren't crazy enough. I don't want to say they're not talented enough. I think all my filmmaker friends, we joke all the time. You have you have to be a little crazy to try to do this. There has to be something about you that just doesn't accept the norms of things in order to get something like this made, because otherwise it would have given up a long time ago.
It's an impossible scenario, it seems, to
It's to and that's why you have to be a little, you have to be out there to to say, you know, 100 people just said no, but I still have the same enthusiasm that I did when I asked the first person. And so it's just this kind of incessant drive to keep going.
and probably 80% of the 100 people, the 80 of those 100 are not saying no because they don't like your script. They're saying no because of other considerations.
Right. And a lot of what I've had to learn the hard way is most of those considerations are timing based.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where my kind of, um, for lack of a better term, like psycho spiritual approach to living has really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
In that, um, I realize that I can do what I have to do, but sometimes the right attitude is not to take more action, but to just kind of, you know, sit back and, you know, try to align with whatever's coming to me, um, as opposed to, you know, beating down more doors. Sometimes it's better to just be a little more open and receptive to what could be there already.
Is there any value in sort of doing research into what famous filmmakers did with their first film. Is there value in kind of studying that? I mean, like was it George Lucas was what's THX? So one whatever what was the
1138.
yeah?
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah, I
something
think
there?
there is you know, that's actually a really good question, because there are a lot of filmmakers, you could name all of those, like Lucas, and how Spielberg snuck onto the I think it was the Universal lot, um and built his way from sneaking in there, and Scorsese kind of raised his own money, or spent his own money on his first film. So there are some lessons to be learned there. uh I but also, I just think it also, it depends on, um it depends on where you are in your life situation. And also, I think because everything's so politically contentious now, there's been a lot of conversations I've had about, okay, well, who are we really aligning with to make this film? What are these alliances that we're creating? Because um it's so much it's like we live in a glass bowl, and it's so much harder now to just I was just having this conversation with someone the other day. It felt like there a few generations ago, let's say even just politically, um, you know, I could look at you and say, let's say you and I have completely opposing views politically. We couldn't be more opposite. But personally, we really like each other. And so we eventually could find common ground based on the fact that we could relate to each other intimately as two people. Um, and I find that now, just trying to raise money, and who we're talking to, and people are saying, well, you couldn't, the content and what your film is about doesn't align with these potential funders politically, so how could you associate yourselves with them? And I always kind of come back and say, well, I don't know if politics is the end depth level to which we can actually relate. I feel like we may disagree there, but this person actually really enjoys and is interested in the subject material of my film, and maybe we can find the common ground there. But it just seems there's a lot of volatility around um, political affiliations, even though it's truly just a creative, narrative film project. So I don't know if I'm answering your questions well at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. You are. I think you're giving us the flavor of the challenge that there is in doing
Yeah.
it. I mean, when you say it's crazy, yeah, it's crazy. So the the whole business seems to be so dominated by streaming platforms,
Yes.
and that these platforms buy properties, and they make, Netflix and Amazon Prime, doing a lot of creating of content,
Hmm.
their own investment in filmmaking. And so where do you think that goes in the future? I mean, and here's where in particular, what I'm asking: does it make sense for? Is the It's a hard question to ask. Are we seeing that it's becoming more and more difficult for um, filmmaking to be done as a one-off film, as
Hmm.
opposed to doing a serialized story of the same story? Where you have like um, you have six segments of a story that builds through a 6 week release of an hour or an hour and a half, you know, and that you ended up with, well, 6, that would be 3, you know, 9 hours of filmmaking opposed to 2 hours or 2.5 hours. I mean, is this something that is a concern for filmmakers today, that the traditional filmmaking that was done has been done for 100 years plus is going to be more difficult to do in the future because of these streaming platforms?
Honestly, I would say yes and no. Okay, one example is, do you remember within the last couple of years there was a new platform that came out called Tubi,
Yeah, yeah,
and it was the really short form, bite-sized content that I think they raised over $1 billion. I mean, it was just this massive, and it completely flopped. I mean, just I don't even think they lasted 6 months.
right.
They didn't get. They thought they would have 1,000 times more subscribers than they did, and so that to me showed, okay, there are plenty of people out there still who would rather invest an hour and a half, 2 hours in a film, or 16, 18 hours in a series. I believe that there are enough people out there who want to go to movie theaters, but are also, even your mainstream audiences, I think, are hungry for something outside of Marvel movies.
Mhm.
Like I really think your just average moviegoer is still curious in films that are a little bit more artistic than just your piecemeal, you know, Iron Man 17. And that gives me a lot of hope. I mean, my wife and I have been talking to a few people in New York and in California who are, interested in building more independent film companies who are, focused on more middle America, and how can these filmmakers really engage, a lot of the population that doesn't live along the coasts or in Chicago, or and so my gut really says there's still an audience for a lot of stuff out there. People want to get out of their houses, you know. But one other point I think that's really interesting is that, because you brought up the streaming platforms, and so there's a lot of debate now. Can films that just get bought by a streaming service, let's say, how do they do in comparison to films that have a theatrical release and then a subsequent streaming distribution? And still, there's a lot of evidence to show, I was reading about this recently, that films that have a theatrical release first, or in general, still do significantly better than films that just get bought out. And that, as a, as a filmmaker, that's also really cool to me to read that. You know, as soon as you think people are just, they're never leaving their houses again, they're just going to be wearing goggles on their faces that, are showing them movies, people still want to go.
I think that there is demarcation line that's forming between theatrical film
Mm-hmm.
and the series that people like to binge watch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I waited until the third season of Ted Lasso was complete, and then I
Yes.
watched the third season. Then I immediately went and watched all 3 seasons, and did all
Nice.
that in a week. And because I like that immersion in a story which has many hours to tell the story,
Mm-hmm.
and has a chance to develop the characters with some real depth, and that's the benefit of series television if they choose to do it that way.
Right.
Now, I went to see Oppenheimer,
I still haven't seen it yet.
and I walked out of the theater, and I went to the box office and bought another ticket and watched it twice in the same day.
Wow.
And then 3 days later, I saw it a third time.
Wow.
And each, and I think this is the value of theatrical releases. Each experience was different because I was different at each time. The first one, it was a very emotional thing for me because, well, it's this historical story about science, and had some of my heroes of science, Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein and Kurt Gödel. They're all in that movie. I'm thinking, God, this is just fantastic. Then I watched the second time and totally unemotional, and I was captivated by the story. And the third time, not to spoil it, but there are two storylines that he's blended into this, and I could really see the two storylines in a separation. So it wasn't binging, but it was a three different experiences of the same movie, which I think is one of the strengths that Christopher Nolan brings to the filmmaking art, is that the complexity there enables the viewer to have that kind of differing experiences with the film.
Yeah, that's cool that you had multiple different experiences in the subsequent viewings, and I'm sure if Christopher Nolan heard that would make him smile. But I mean, what's so cool about him to me, and his brother, because his brother's his writing partner, is that I can tell that, I just imagine I can imagine Christopher Nolan and his brother, Jonathan, like sitting in their chateau in LA, and they're sitting out by the pool, and they light a joint, and they're like, let's make a Jungian psychology heist movie. Like, and so they're able to explore all of these, what you can tell is very personal interests. Like in Inception, you got all of the depth psychology there, and in Interstellar, they're exploring the like quantum physics and space-time continuum and all these things, and yet they're turning them into a heist movie, a family drama, and it's that's when you're watching filmmakers at a very high level, because they're able to infuse so many personal interests into like a genre film, and that's really hard to do.
Well, I thought Jonathan's Persons of Interest series was just one of the best. I've watched it twice all the way through, because it's and because each of the characters is really interesting. All the storylines are really interesting, and I would say that's the Marvel TV series are like that as well. Far better than I think the
big movies.
So I think, if I may say it this way, David, that what will always remain true is good storytelling, and not just simple stories, but complex stories where there's ideas involved and emotion involved and complexity of relationship. I think those things will always sell because they're so representative of the way we live as human beings.
Of course, and I still don't know of a better medium than filmmaking that is able to capture the depth and intensity of life in the same way that filmmaking does. I don't you get a really good filmmaker who's just got, got an eye for telling the story in the right way, but also the heart and the depth and the nuance of the character. I mean, it's sometimes it bothers me when people say, "Oh, well, all the good stories have run out."
It's ridiculous.
And it makes me think, if you gave Martin Scorsese an iPhone, he could go make an unbelievable film, and it will have more depth than but that's where I kind of believe in the auteur theory. I mean, I believe that these great filmmakers, they are artists, and they deserve to have the resources and the capacities to be able to go really explore these things. But I think you're absolutely right. It's exactly how lives are lived,
I think there are a lot of storylines that have not been explored, and because stories are about people,
Yep.
life, but also about the about virtual lives and the lives that we imagine ourselves having. I mean,
Mhm.
and all of those things never expire. There's no shelf date on these things. I mean,
Mhm.
if you could do a story about, and you look at Gladiator, for example, that was as contemporary a film as you can imagine, but it was it was really captured the time of ancient Rome. And
Mhm.
there, and so being able to blend those two to make it contemporary and also historic is that's an inexhaustible um, source of storytelling, I think.
Yeah, that's a good example of a film. Short documentary about an elderly gentleman that my wife and I made, just the two of us, a few years ago, that I absolutely, it's one of my favorite things I've ever done still.
You ever try to get a coffee thing and don't want to come out? One for measurement. I drink about 3 cups or 4 cups a day. I don't like it where it will make you stand up. Don't ever go to Spain, that's the way they make their coffee. I really didn't have a steady girlfriend. I had, when I was younger, I thought I had a steady, but it didn't happen that way. And so I really was playing the field, but since I met my wife, that was it. I don't know, I guess somebody hit me with something. There we are, there's me and Dolores. That's a picture of the wedding. I remember asking her, I said, when I graduate, will you marry me? She said, yeah, but what are we going to live on? I said, well, it won't be love. Well, I had to keep my job. But, October, it was 2 years. We did most everything together. I had a pretty good life. I can't complain. The only things, I don't call it bad luck, but lost my daughter when she was 12, and my wife in the hospital for almost over 6 months. And I grew up quick, I think. So. And there's Betty Ann. When that was taken a month before she got killed. There's the gang. I never thought I'd have a big name or anything, but I always thought if you taught your kids right, and they're not going to be perfect. Nobody is. They're going to have their ups and downs too, but I'm very proud of the way it turned out. So. Oh, come on in.
Come on in. How
Wait.
you doing today?
Good.
Meals and Wheels. Jim Hagee here.
Yep. Have
How
you
you
been
doing
there?
today?
Hey, you have a good day, and you're a veteran, right?
That's right. I'm in Air Force.
Yeah, that's a good.
4 years in the Air Force.
4 years.
At Duluth, Minnesota.
That's one of the coldest places, and they say in winter.
I was on the air deck. It was 36 below.
Yep. That's where it really gets. The Air Force.
So, but
I had a friend I worked with that was stationed out there. He said only servicemen go out in that hole.
that's right. It's an Air Defense Command.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Hey, you have a good week.
Okay, you too.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Chicken and yeah.
All right.
I visited a couple places and I'm not ready for them. And as long as I can do it my own, I'm going to do it my own. Yeah, I'm so used to eating with my wife. That's the most loneliest part. I get along with people with churches, the ones that's in their 50s or 60s. And I don't like going around somebody and going yelling about his aches and pains, because everybody has them. I just don't feel that old. Here you go. And you can bring your girl around and swing her around here. I forget all the steps, but that's it. You asked me, that's what I wanted to be, but you know, when you live in a little town like Newport, you don't tell everybody you wanted to be a dancer. See how green it is? That's how you know it's getting water. All right, that's good enough. I don't put a lot of fertilizer on them. Put a little bit, but not much. There's an ant trying to make it. They're terrible around here. They just killed him. I'm a murderer. I always thought I could fix everything, but sometimes you can't fix everything. Sometimes you got to get help. I had a little trouble with moving down here. I put my place up there sale, and the next day it was sold, and we moved in a month. And I had to watch all my, all my furniture, because I couldn't bring it all. Put one this way and have this so they can see it. Put that one up there.
Bill, how are you doing?
Great.
Good. It's good to see you.
I know she should probably learn to play piano and beat us pretty bad if she played again.
We didn't beat you though. Dolores and I wanted to beat you and Brian, but we didn't. We tried our best.
We played double-handed piano.
men against women.
Yeah.
Hi, Dad.
Hey.
Hey, Brian.
My friends always enjoyed being around him. We played kickball, wiffle ball. He was always a pitcher, and he was involved out in the yard with us.
If we got a game or something like that, I pitched and kept rolling it, and then I had all the kids playing. Yeah. And then one little boy, I go out and play soccer with him, and that I hurt myself at work a little bit, my leg. I said, I don't think I'm going to go out. And guess what Justin did? Knocked on the door, and he's 3 years old, or 4. He says, he said to my wife, can Mr. Howard come out and play?
Neighbor's grandkid.
Oh, it's starting to cool off.
Yeah, it's getting a little
You know what they're going to do? They're going to get them Jersey people to put the emblems on the wall there.
How often do you see us?
At least once a week.
At least once. Yeah, often
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, because he's right up the road, but we're.
I don't try to bother him. I mostly call if
Sometimes we'll walk the dog down here and stop in.
Hey.
Hey, we'll see ya.
Yeah,
You
see ya.
take care.
I'll see you.
All right.
Take care.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a call later on.
All right.
We'll be in touch.
All righty.
See you later.
Here. It's done.
So David, tell us about your, if you're, to the degree, to the extent that you can, tell us about this feature film that you're looking to develop and produce.
Yeah, so I can say that it started, the beginning kernels of the project started with my discovery of, I had actually moved away from Lancaster to New York City, and I read an article in Newsweek that was by the former mayor of Lancaster City, and in National Newsweek magazine, and it was why I'm proud to be mayor of America's refugee capital. And I saw Amish people in the photo, and I was curious, so I someone actually sent it to me. And I read all about how Lancaster County, PA, under the Obama administration, was named one of these kind of quote unquote, refugee haven key cities across America, and then was named America's refugee capital because of how many were resettled per capita in the county. And that kind of blew my mind, because I was like, well, I grew up here. How did I not know this? And so I, started contacting some people back here and was introduced to a whole group of former refugees who all, were willing to meet with me and kind of tell me their life story. There were so many pieces based on the interviews we had that it started inspiring what now has become a very fictional narrative film. And in the film, we have this main character, former refugee, who's still dealing with all of these people back home, where he's from, needing assistance and all of these things, and he's going through a struggle of actually losing his kids, losing access to his kids. And in the storyline, he meets a local woman who's a musician who's struggling with bipolar disorder, and she's also going through this crisis of potentially losing her kids due to this diagnosis. And so the film is really about these two people who meet each other and find this common ground in their very unfortunate and unlikely scenario of not being sure if they're gonna still have access to their own children anymore. And it's about them finding ways in which they need a little bit of the other in each other to kind of cope and become more whole and move forward in their lives. And so my wife hates this phrase, but an unlikely friendship develops between these two people in this kind of central Pennsylvania town. And we see a lot of the rhythms of their lives, of how they live and how they function. And so that's the basis of it.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's it's been I think I mentioned we call it our third child. It's grown and evolved, and what's cool, because it's the first feature film that I've ever, written and co-written, I should say, is it feels like it always must become its own entity. That whether it takes inspiration from that feels like a very existential topic, like how do filmmakers get inspired, and where's the difference between truth and fiction, in how some of these films get made. But it very much feels like we were inspired by meeting these people, and then after a while, some of the shades of these things that we learned and how we empathize with them started having legs of their own, and then it just becomes, the fictional characters become their own people, and you almost have to just let them go and tell you where they're gonna go. And that's the hardest part, is letting them loose and saying, you tell us how to be. So yeah, that's the basis of the project. And
well, it sounds great. And let's as that unfolds, let's stay in touch, and maybe we can do a series of
that would be awesome. We're actually waiting to hear on some very exciting news regarding the project right now, and it's I've had to learn a lot of patience, but being a dad to these guys, learning patience firsthand is just, you have to. I remember, you'll appreciate this, and you probably won't use this in the edit, but when my first son was born, I was at the grocery store, and this woman in front of me was clearly having the worst day of her life. Like, I could tell probably before that she probably got in a car accident, lost her job. They always hit on the same day. And she was just fumbling with her money, and the cashier just looked at me and she said, "Sir, you have so much patience." And I said, "I'm a dad now. I don't feel like I have a choice."
Yeah.
I mean, you just kind of.
And it gets it forms in you that then gets transferred to other areas of your life.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a good way you just said it, actually.
Okay, well, David, this has been great. It'll be interesting to see how this ends up being edited, but it'll be great, and it really is all very good. I may leave more of it in than and so I will look forward to seeing your videos. Look forward to having a further conversation with you, and if there's any way I can help you, I'd be glad to. And other than giving you money, I don't have any money to give you, but somehow to, when the time comes to pitch, for support, we can come back and do another edition of this with you and your wife, and we can talk more directly about what the film's about, and who knows who will see it. There's hundreds of people that see these videos when they go out, so you never know. You just never know, and that's why. So because I want my guests to feel that they have been presented in the very best light, and that people should know them and support them in whatever endeavor that they're doing. So that's really why I'm doing this, to a large extent. So I look forward to seeing this, and look forward to seeing the premiere of this film when it finally gets done.
You know what? You will, wherever that premiere is, you will have a ticket.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you, and I think we have a lot more movie stuff to talk about at some point off edit, but we'll do that some other time.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, I mean, I feel very a lot of gratitude towards you for reaching out and for you know, and this is, something I'm sure we can talk about more, but I've done quite a lot of digging into you and your work, and I just think a lot of the stuff you're interested in, whether it's the philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and now that I know you're into film, I mean, I do feel like we could have endless conversations of things of that nature. But I think also, clearly your work, like working with executives and things like that. I mean, there's a whole lot there that I'd actually like to ask you about, because there's a whole other thing I'm building personally that's more in that realm. But I find your work and just speaking with you to be just, this has been really nice, and I really appreciate you doing what you do and reaching out, and yeah, I feel it in my heart, a lot of gratitude towards you for that.
Thank you very much. I'm honored by your appreciation, and it's one of the perks of being able to talk to people. So
It's great.
I wish you well in your endeavor, and in raising those two boys, and what a great opportunity you have, and to do for your boys what your father did for you.
Yeah.
I did want to say that, your story of what your father did was outstanding, and because he allowed you to learn, motivated you, but allowed you to learn on your own speed, in your own way, and here you are today, a filmmaker, and what a beautiful thing, what a beautiful testimony to your father's love and care for you as his son.
Yeah, no, that's I'm grateful that you said that too, because sometimes, sons and fathers always have their, you know, I don't even have to say it. But in some ways, you realize that it was in what seemed like insignificant moments that the real power and the love was there, and it was everything that you needed and still need. And so, yeah, being a father now is I take very seriously, but it's also incredibly challenging, and has pushed me to the core of myself in ways that nothing else has.
Perfect. Make you a better filmmaker.
Exactly. But yeah, this was so nice, and I hope your daughter's move to Lancaster, wherever they're living now. It's so funny that they're here. I would laugh so hard if they live right down the street. That I probably drive by them every day.
I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna call them.
Yeah, tell her I live near the Women and Babies Hospital.
Okay.
That's a good staple for where.
Well, that's where she had her child.
Okay, so that's where Charlie was born.
Yeah, they had a son back in the spring, and and that's where she went, and she had a great experience there. So that's great. Okay, David, thanks a lot for watching. I mean, not
Thank you too.
for being on here, and thank you everyone for watching. This has been an unusual episode of the Eddie Network podcast, because we had little boys running in and out of the picture and grabbing their father's attention, and so understand that this is real life, and maybe, just maybe, that experience will show up in a film someday that David Godin and his wife will make. I certainly hope so, because I think it would be a great thing for all of us to see. So thank you again, David, and thank you everyone. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye-bye.